Last week, we talked about whether or not a story can be entertaining but also have no real meaning. We quickly came to the conclusion that finding meaning in things is basically the essence of what makes us human. So today, my good friend and fellow artist MK Gibson and I want to explore what makes a story worth telling. And to do that, we are joined by a very special guest who has spent years listening to, creating and telling stories himself. Our guest is Father Roderick, who you may know from his own podcast, Fans. He is a priest, an author, a podcaster, and an artist with a particular passion for stories and what they reveal about us. So what makes a story worth telling? Is it entertainment, beauty, truth, meaning? And what happens when all of those things come together? Let's find out in another Butcher Shop. Alright, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today, Father Roderick, or as you prefer, just Roderick. How are you doing, sir?
I'm excited to be here.
Which is weird because your platform is like ginormous compared to my 16 listeners. So like I should be the one being nervous.
Oh, no. I'm always nervous when I have to go on an interview. It doesn't matter if it's on TV or if it's a podcast. It's always a bit tense because you don't know what people are going to ask.
That's true.
I don't know. You always want to make sense, which is already hard in day-to-day life, let alone on a podcast.
This is true. And you mentioning you don't know what people are going to ask. I mean, we do have Gib on the show as well, so you might be up for a few surprises.
Yeah, I noticed I got passed over. That's fine. Great intro, Sandy. Well done. I mean, Good job. Hey, I'm Sandy. Welcome back to Butcher's Block. My guest today, plural. But no, that's fine. I see where like Dutch pride cometh before the Gibby fall. That's fine.
The thing is, I usually say we'll fix this in post, but you know that I actually have a pre-recorded intro in which I already introduce you, right, Gib?
Yeah, but that doesn't count. That's not.
It's not a real acknowledgement.
It's not. That's not human. Way to go, AI. Well done.
I see what kind of
I can feel your anger at me right now.
I feel like for some reason you two are going to make it so impossible for me rather than me making it impossible.
That's kind of the job of second chair is to so first chair, it's kind of like, again, this is pro wrestling or boxing match. You are the play-by-play and I'm the color commentator. My job is to make it hard for you.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
But I am going to once again ask a question to Roderick, if you don't mind, sir.
Go ahead.
I will allow it.
Exactly. But I mean, most people, a lot of people know you, but a lot of people wouldn't necessarily expect you on my podcast. So could you give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, and why it actually makes sense that I invited you into the podcast?
Right. Well, I'm a Dutch Catholic priest. I was born in 1968, so I'm super old. And I've always been a creative boy. I've always been drawing comic books, recording my own radio shows. I always had like 20 hobbies at the same time, which is kind of probably why later on I discovered that I'm probably a bit on the spectrum.
I mean, we don't recognize that at all, of course.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I think it's quite. It strikes me that so many people in the creative sphere are, either ADHD or autistic or a combination thereof. But in terms of creativity, it's a superpower because it means you're always full of ideas, and I never had enough time to do everything. And that hasn't changed, even though at a later age I became a priest. I still had all those hobbies, and I still was like an incredible geek nerd. As a child, I would dress up like Luke Skywalker, and nobody would know who that was, and I had to explain that this is not Star Trek. And, like my entire childhood is full of nerdy traumas. And once I started working as a priest, again, I was in a bit of a strange situation because most of my interests were so outside of the norm that I had to almost do them in secret. So when I just started off as a 28-year-old priest in a tiny little village, I started to build a Star Wars website. just by myself, and that thing went super viral. I had hundreds of thousands of visitors every day. Got invited by Lucasfilm to come over for the premiere of The Phantom Menace. Had a whole tour of Skywalker Ranch, and
that's crazy.
Nobody in my parish knew that. Nobody had any idea that I was doing all that stuff.
That is so cool.
And so that has always remained with me. I at a certain moment went to Rome to study. Actually, I was sent there to study theology, but I got bored after a month and discovered that there was also a social communications division of the university, and you could just study media. And it was basically radio production, television production, social media, all that. And so I did that illegally, secretly on the side, and it became my main thing. And so when I came back to the Netherlands, I was actually fully trained as a radio television host or producer. And so that landed me my first job in Dutch radio and television. Started to present programs, and then at one point I was so intrigued. I was learning so much from these media makers that I thought, I want to do this myself. I want to make my own documentaries. So that's what I ended up doing. Produced for 17 years, about 30 documentaries each year. Filmed everything myself, recorded everying myself, edited everything myself.
You were the whole production team.
Yes, because there was no money. So it was all super shoestring budget. But that's also how I learned a lot. But there was one downside with all that, and that is I was still always working creatively for other people, or in the context of my vocation or my calling or whatever you want to call it. And I started to miss the days that I remembered as a child, that I would just sit down and draw something just for the fun of it, do something really for myself. And I think it's now about a year and a half ago that I was at Elfia, so one of those fantasy festivals in the Netherlands. It was in the fall or late summer.
It was the one in Arsen.
And I probably
that's the one in fall.
I walked up to the boot of the Silver Spore.
Yeah, to the publishing house. Yeah.
Publishing house, the one where your book is also published now. And I started just chatting with the authors there and interviewing them for little videos to share on social media. And then at one point, the owner, you could say, of the publishing house, Kokkie, she asked me, but can I ask you, have you ever written a story, or have you never dreamt of writing a book?
She asked that to you?
I was like, yeah, she asked me. and it was like, my first reaction was, oh no, I can't do that. I mean, I'm a priest. I'm a responsible person. I don't have time for that. I'm too old. I have never done this before. But it just, I don't know, something awakened in me. And a couple of months later, I started writing my first book. And that was about, now it's about a year and a half ago. And I've never stopped writing. And then with the joy of, and that was fantasy. It was just, I wanted to write a fantasy book. And with that came also kind of this, I gave myself permission to do other creative stuff. And so I picked up drawing again, at first on the iPad. And now I'm drawing with, watercolor and acrylic paint.
I saw one of your little medieval thingies on Insta the other day. I was like, oh my God, it's contagious. Everybody's doing medieval things. That's super
contagious.
So cool.
And it was also because I kept meeting people like you who were doing it and were actually living the life that I aspire to. And it's like, I need to do this. And so it really changed my life in the sense that, of course, I'm still doing my job and I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I feel much more that I uncovered part of myself that I had suppressed for way too long because I felt like life is too serious for all this creative stuff. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, life is so short. I need to do more creative stuff. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Yeah, and that's why it totally makes sense that I invited you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. But that's something you and I have, Sandy, and I've talked about many a times. Like, it's this desire, especially I feel as I get older, I have to create more. Because it's like, I realize that time is limited. Time is, so it's this desire to like, yes, I can consume like I did as a child, like you, much like you grew up Star Wars, fantasy fiction, hiding it because again, I'm not as old as you, but only a few years behind you, and the era of which I grew up in America, it was not cool to be a geek the way it is now. It is not a cool kind of nerdy kind of thing. No. This was like this was a shunned hobby. These were shunned people. The comic book stores were for nerds and for losers and for people that were outcasts of society. But you still loved it regardless. Because it spoke to the child in you. It spoke to the desire, the dreams, the what's bigger than us kind of fiction, the mythology of like even like the Greek and Roman myths, etc. Long story short, this desire to create has never gone away, and it just intensifies as the year goes by. So I don't know about you, but also spectrum based, and I can't sit still. I'm literally doing digital art while we're talking at the same time. So yeah.
And you know what? I actually think that's a good thing because you would have hit the microphone with your hands for at least 4 times right now.
So, don't worry. I'm still like, you worry about my gesticulating later, lady. I'm getting better on it. Okay. So I also have little fidget things in my hands to keep them
good.
when I'm,
that's good. Yeah. Building in some safety nets here.
Yeah. I'm also looking at your, like, well, I just followed him on Instagram. So that's really cool. I mean, like I'm inspired by some of the things you just said because that, I felt, there's a kindredness there to, the upbringing.
Yeah, and it's true what you said is that nowadays geek culture is very much mainstream, but I never knew that time. I actually right now I'm feeling like wow, this is kind of the life that I always hoped would ever would arrive at some point. I had to wait quite a long time for this to become mainstream. Yeah. But I always knew it. This is going to win because it's so cool. It's so much more fun to be creative, to live in this world full of stories than it is to just, browse, doom scroll through your news feed right. And then just get more and more depressed.
I think for me personally, it's a sort of sense of wonder, like what can, completely blow me away 1 second or what can really inspire me the next. And I rarely see that in any other genre or subculture than this whole fantasy sci-fi thing. It's like everything can amaze you, and it probably will, and that's a wonderful thing. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's kind of this gift that we receive as children, and that we just forget about. And so maybe that's why I love the story of Peter Pan, and just this whole idea of your childhood isn't gone. It's just that you have forgotten about its superpowers. And once you rediscover that and you reintegrate that, then,
But do you feel like you have forgotten it, or that, through your upbringing and maybe also like the religious side of things, that it was sort of trained out of you?
Not really, because when I look back at even my time in seminary, I still continue to draw, and I was super creative and did all sorts of stuff. It's just that in my mind, it was just a hobby. It didn't count. It wasn't work. Whereas now I'm thinking, well, no, actually, artistic expression is also part of who I am. It's an integral part of my identity, not just a little side thing, like a side hobby that other people look down on. So it's much more. It's not that my behavior has changed. But more that I think my own valuation of that side of me has changed, and it's also now that I start to realize again that creativity was also always a super strong element of any Christian culture, at least in the Catholic tradition. If you look at those cathedrals and how incredible the art is in everything, you had all these talents working together, building something beautiful, telling all these stories visually. I mean, I'm just in a way doing it in my way with my background in culture, but it is part of a much larger, centuries old tradition. I think of this desire, or this even it's bigger than a desire. It's something that's pushing me from the inside, that wants to express itself.
It's part of the soul, I think, in a way. And I remember a couple of years ago, Gib, you and I would talk very often while I was in the query trenches looking for an agent, and then people would start coming back, like, no, it's not for me, it's not right, you're not good enough. And I remember saying more than once, I was born, I was put on this earth to tell this story, and people can laugh at me all they want, but I am fully convinced that I'm here to tell stories, and whether that's through the word or through pictures or images or whatever.
Or all of the above, yeah. Yeah. You're very much accurate in that, because there's always going to be a certain amount of people that have this desire to create and there's the desire to consume, and there's nothing wrong with consuming, and it's not putting one person on a pedestal over another, but everyone has a bit of a storyteller in them. Everybody has a bit of a creative in them, and whether that has been fostered or not comes down to the individual. Again, when people say, I can't draw, no, you can't draw the way someone else draws. You draw the way you draw, but you practice. I can't tell stories. You can, but you tell them a different way. Maybe you can tell a joke. Maybe you are better just guiding people through a regular day, maybe a counseling session. You can tell a story. It's not just writing a book. You have to remember that just because other people can do certain things and you can't copy it does not mean you can't do that thing. You just do it in your own way. In the writing world, we call that your voice. Only you can tell a story the way you tell a story. Only you can draw a picture the way you draw a picture. That will modify, that will change, that will improve over time, but you have to remember that you can do it. You just can't is a 4-letter word, as we used to say. So you got to get over yourself.
I want to go back to you, Roderick, and something you said a moment ago, and it kind of, it completely links into, let me finish, man.
No. Oh, because we have a company over, I have to behave.
No, man.
Just shut
I'm
up.
going to count to 10 real quick. Hold on.
Moving on.
1, 2, 3, 4. It completely links into what you just said, Kip. And I'm trying to connect these things if you let me.
I'll allow it.
But a moment ago, Roderick, you said something like you realized you were telling all these stories for other people.
Yeah.
And now we are very much talking into, but we are telling these stories for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And what I'm kind of wondering about is, 2 weeks ago during Castlefest, you interviewed me about the new book. And part of me wonders, do you do that because you feel like you want to bring out that story? Or do you feel like, you're doing me a favor by giving me the spotlight for a second? Because I can totally imagine there's like this evolution of things going on. Like part of you really enjoys telling other people's stories, and maybe you even learn from that. And you can put that in your own stories, and, sort of it meanders into something that turns into your thing in the end. Also, Gib, I totally just hit my glass instead of my microphone.
I was listening. That's fine. Wasn't going to say anything. I'm glad you have an awareness. That's cool.
Yeah, no. But you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a difference for you between, or can you explain the difference about, when you're telling someone else's story for someone else, or when you're telling someone else's story for you?
For me, it's both of these aspects are rooted in the same love for stories. I love stories. I love to plunge myself in different realities. And whether I'm a consumer or a reader or someone who is just listening to someone else's story, or I'm telling my own story, for me, it's an equal joy. I'm passionate about these worlds, and I always feel like a bit of an explorer. And so when I do an interview with you, and you tell me, and that's what I love about the creative realm, is everyone you speak to loves what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be creatives. And so you get this passionate story about, this world that you created, and this lone god who is like hunted down by all these alchemists, and then like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about that world. So it's curiosity driven. And it's also, but that is a realization that I had kind of more in hindsight, now that I'm actually like working my way through the backlog of all these interviews that I've done over the past couple of months. This is also for me an incredible way to learn about storytelling, because every writer is different. They all have their own, angle to it, their own techniques, their own habits, and I find that it's not that I'm copying someone, but it just kind of stimulates me to think about, so how am I going to tell this story? Or sometimes I get an idea, it's like, oh wow, that is so cool, I can probably do that also in this or that chapter.
I think it's a great mirror in a way.
Yeah, a mirror, and sometimes it's also like if you go to any museum with painted art, I'm sure that you look at a painting differently than a normal visitor. You look at it maybe from an angle of like, oh, that is very cool, but you're also looking from an angle like, that is an interesting technique, or I love the way the light works here.
Gabe, you want to jump in here?
No, everything you're doing
this all the time.
No, we really much do. Yes, whenever you practice something, it's really hard to turn off that part of your brain, which is how would I do it, or how is the sausage made? How is this sentence constructed? How is this passage constructed? How is this idea, this concept, this writing? How is it done? Or in the art world, how is this layered? How is this done? What would I do in this? And sometimes you have to be, there is a part of you that is the fan, and then the part of you that is like the creative. And there's, it's, I can always tell when something's really cool because I don't think about the creative part. Like I just, as a fan, it just hits me like I am into this. Then unfortunately you have time to sit there and think about it. You start to pick because eventually, but that's also a good thing too, is like, because I mean, all right, you look at something like for fans out there in the written world, like Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. It's been around for many, many years, obviously many decades. It's a very long series of runs. It's very famous. And it is, especially in book one, extremely, extremely, extremely inspired by Tolkien. There are so many parallels of so many characters and so many settings and so many scenes that are very Tolkien, and the hobbits escaping the Shire scenes. You can see where he was heavily influenced by Tolkien. Now, as the books go on, they find their own voice and they find their own thing, obviously. But we're all inspired by something else. That is the nature of stories. That is what does it for us, because it lights something inside you that you didn't know was there, or fans of flame that's just make it a little bit much brighter. I'm very much a fan of that. So never be afraid of like being inspired by something. Again, that's how you find your voice. You start somewhere and then you evolve.
Exactly. That's constantly the kind of the two sides of me when I'm conducting an interview, is like I'm totally plunging myself in my imagination in that world, but then there's this second layer in my brain that's like, okay, what's going to be the next question, and how can I make this interview flow better? What question could help the person that I'm interviewing? So that's kind of my professional side of having worked for a long time in the media industry, but it's competing. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I could just talk with this author for 10 hours because there's just so much I want to know.
Just to exchange.
And then they probably tell me after an hour, just go buy the book. Leave me alone.
That's the best ones. Like I've had some interviews where people are like very formulaic, and that's fine. I'll answer the formulaic questions. But my favorite interviews I've ever done with people is when they're like, if we want to talk about the book, great. If people get to like me, they'll find the book afterwards. Because same thing when I'm doing a panel at a convention. I'm not there to promote my book. If you like me and you'll find my book, that's fantastic. That's great. But if you want to connect with me as a person, that's what I do an interview for. Here's what I'm about. Here's what you're about. Let's have a conversation. And like we're doing now, like the books come later. The product comes later. I can sell you something, but that's kind of feels like when someone's always trying to sell me something. Like whenever someone's on a panel, like when I wrote blank and blank, I was thinking about, I'm like, I see what you did there. And now I'm turned off immediately. Like stop used cars selling me your thing. I don't care. Like I know you're an author. I can see your face. I know you're up on the panel or you're an artist. I get that. But what are you about? Because unfortunately, we do live in a world right now that with the media that we have, we know way more about our creatives than we ever wanted to or needed to, and that sometimes that turns somebody immediately on or off based on.
I have a bit of an anecdote in response to this, and
you can't get the genie back in the bottle. It's out there now. The internet has made it so that like, oh, so and so's like they politically lean this way, religiously that way, personally this way. I'm in, I'm out, I'm indifferent. So it just is. So go ahead. What's your story? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm by lack of a different word choice, I have a bit of a confession to make, Roderick.
That's okay.
I remember the first time you and I talked. I think it was during the Novio Magica event. I think it was it was at least 2 years ago. And I remember you walking up and you talking to me, and for a couple of minutes I thought, oh my God, this man is going to try to convert me or something. He's asking about my fantasy work, and then he's gonna ask like, have you heard of the Lord Jesus Christ? And part of me was so surprised that you were so genuinely interested in this case, the person being me, and what I had to tell you. And and that's why I say, like, it's kind of a confession because it's kind of an asshole thing to say.
No, I get that a lot.
I know you're a little bit better now,
look
and
at
I'm
me
just
like, oh, who is this guy?
Oh my God, yeah, what is he going to do now? What is he going to sell me apart from the word?
Right.
The
and I
Lord,
hate it when people have a hidden agenda. Myself, it's my big frustration when I'm browsing on TikTok and it's like, okay, 5 tips, and then after 5 tips, by the way, just put the word so and so, and I will send you my 5-course, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, come on! So you were just selling me a product. Fun, yeah. I was listening to you.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, I'm sorry. We do that all the time at the end of every episode. It's like, please follow us, please like us. And by the way, you should, as a listener or viewer right now.
That's different. That's just asking for a connection. But if you feel like, everything they tell me is transactional because they're actually not really interested in me, but just interested in selling me something. And that could be like, faith as well, It's like, okay, I'm going to listen to all this stuff about fantasy, and then, but there's something missing in your books, and that is a deeper layer. And I have just the right thing for you. If you only sign up for my 5-week spiritual retreat, it's for you. It's only $30 a session. And then I can guarantee you that your books will be.
When did he become English?
Exactly. I was thinking, like, the voice is perfect. Have you considered doing ads with that voice?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because here's my confession. Before we had this thing, I talked to Sandy because we were having this pre-meeting about what should the topic be, how is it going to flow, etc. And I asked a very legitimate question, like, are some of the questions you're asking, is this an inroads for, say, proselytizing?
Uh-huh.
And she's like, no, I've talked to him plenty of times, and he's like, he's into fantasy, he's into stories, and the communication. If it happens to come up, so be it. But it's not there to be an event. And I appreciate that because some of my favorite conversations I've ever had with people of the faith are like we're having now. Like I said to Sandy, there's a religious world, there's a secular world, and how do the two connect? Is that's the connection between man and God. And I'm thankful for that. So that was
If you're enjoying this podcast and want to support what we do, head on over to patreon.com/sandybutchers. Members get early access to new content, and higher tier supporters can join the Mail Club, where I send out exclusive art loot up to 4 times per year. It's a great way to get some unique physical goodies while helping keep the podcast going. Check it out at patreon.com/sandybutchers. And thanks for your support. Let's get back to the show.
And it works both ways. One of the things that I love so much about being at these fantasy festivals and speaking to people is that, obviously I first have to kind of joke about me being in clerical costume.
Yeah, you call it cosplaying, 24
hour. I'm always cosplaying. Once I get over that hurdle, then I just feel like I'm just being me. I'm not Father Roderick or Reverend Roderick. I'm just Roderick. I'm a geek. I love fantasy. Let's talk about stories. Tell me what you do. And that feels like also I'm more myself in those situations because I don't have to step into that role of only being the pastor. That's part of my identity, and I won't negate it, but it's like there's so much more in us, and that's true for everyone. And that's probably also why I love these conversations where, it goes in all directions, because we're more than artists. We're more than this or that. We're such interesting, complicated people. And for me, that's the biggest joy of being able to connect with so many people. Whereas when I was younger, and even in my early years as a priest, I felt so alone in this aspect of my life. I felt like, and sometimes even when I have to be in an environment that is highly how do you say that, Catholic or formal, I feel like I'm masking. Like I have to present myself in a certain way, talk about certain things. And the moment I mention the word fantasy, I see, the bishop's eyes glaze over, and it's like, okay, well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Can we get back on topic?
Exactly, because it's no secret that fantasy has been a bit of a taboo within Christianity.
In certain circles.
Yeah, but do you ever feel like your religion or your parish or any that's where my Christian vocabulary ends, by the way. But do you ever feel like they have been in your way when it comes to the things that you love doing or anything? Or did you feel like you had to ask someone for permission to, do the fantasy thing? Or
I never ask permission. I sin first, and then I ask for
forgiveness,
for a blessing. No, thankfully not. Maybe that's also kind of how I was brought up. I've always been even in the church in very creative circles, and people, and generally just maybe it wasn't their thing, but they definitely gave me all the space that I wanted for this kind of stuff. It differs. Sometimes I get like reactions, especially since I'm very present on social media, and then you get people who have no clue who I am, but then they see that I'm at a fantasy fair and I posted a photo, and then I get this comment like, "Father, you're leading people to hell because does this person know that the pentagram stands for whatever?" And like, one of those Bible thumpers. That is so not my world. And just last year, I was walking around in France in a cathedral, and I was looking at all those like stained glass windows, and there was this bishop, this saint bishop, and he had caught a dragon, and he used his religious stole as a leash, and he was dragging the dragon away from the village. So, and then he ordered it to plunge into the sea. I'm thinking, this is high fantasy, and it's this is in my
This
church.
man is walking his dragon. Please let him.
That is so cool. And then, so when you start looking around, especially in the Middle Ages, these people had such an incredible imagination, and they weren't afraid of stories because they knew that stories are kind of the blood of our lives, and it's through stories that we communicate values, that we communicate beauty, and that we instruct people, and so if stories have been such a fundamental part of, I mean, even the Bible, it's a storybook. It's not a journalistic essay about what happened from day to day. No, it's like, let me tell you a story about how the world was created. And so in the beginning there was nothing, and then and then you have all these contradictory stories because there are two accounts of the creation. So it already means that you have multiple storytellers, and one person tells a story this way, another person tells that story that way. So if you look at the way people have expressed what they believe in stories, then how can you be against the stories that we tell in today? I mean, I cannot. There's so many people. I used to have a big podcast about Harry Potter. This was 20 years ago, I think, in the dawn of podcasting. It was called The Secrets of Harry Potter, and we just go through the books and the movies and just look at all the symbolism and then explain where maybe this was inspired, what that was inspired by. And then I would get these emails from people that were furious that I was working with the devil. I mean, there are other reasons now to be very critical of.
Oh, we've learned.
Harry Potter
we are
and its creator. I'm not telling you anything new, but at the time, this was still very safe territory. I could still wear my my what is it, red and yellow shawl. She whose name shall not be mentioned, but it was, for me, it was so weird because I've always read these stories, and it has never ever, led me, at least not that I'm aware of, to the road of perdition, or I've never felt the hellfires coming from a fairy tale, and so I don't see it as opposites at all. It's the same precious thing that we have, the gift of telling each other stories, and if we stop telling each other stories, that's the end of everything. It's the end of culture. It's the end of peace. It's the end of hope. Sorry, I'm preaching here.
No, you.
I do it all the time, and finally someone else does it. Like, I don't get yelled at. So great, you're allowed to do it. That's your profession.
I mean, part of my brain even goes to your Technomancer book, Gib, where basically God has forsaken everything, and I wonder now if that was because the people in your book stopped telling each other stories.
Well, no, I mean, honestly, Technomancer was built because of, honestly, it was my time in the church. There are many reasons. Like, that book came about because, one, my time in the military when I was isolated up in Alaska. I was alone by myself, and that's where I got the Salem character from. What do you do with isolation? How do you survive? But two, my time in the church, like I said, my very first dream, like obviously it's not your first dream. You dream as a child, as a baby, etc. But the one I can remember was around like 3 or 4 years old when the devil came to kill me and kill my my mom was a single mom, so I was stay at this babysitter's house. And I had this dream where like the devil came to kill all the children, and I was the only survivor and I had to watch it. And again, I was like 3 or 4 years old. It was like a frightening thing and blah blah blah. So that dream stuck with me, and so that's where those man versus faith versus isolation versus hope versus the devil. That's where Technomancer came from. I just happened to put all those themes in a world set after the biblical apocalypse. Because again, when I was brought up in the church, because growing up in the Southern Baptist fire and brimstone, pounding the pulpit kind of thing, Revelation was used as a boogeyman. It was used as that like the dead in Christ shall rise and the world will be 1,000 years of darkness. That's not exactly what Revelation says, but again, this is how you scare kids into like. And I'm not talking about anybody's religion. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody's religion. This is how it was taught to me, so how I'm expressing it through my eyes. Mm-hmm. So that concept of being left behind, being, fodder for demons, when the demons take over the world and hell rises, like, how do I deal with that as a kid, trying to you're trying to create meaning. You're trying to create, a way of understanding this. Why would the adults tell me, but they also tell me about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and everything else as well. So what's real? What's fantasy? Again, childhood trying to transition into adulthood. So I took all that, let's just say trauma, and dumped it into the Technomancer world. Like, how can I make all these themes and elements fit? And I'm very good at genre blend. That's my one real pat myself on the back type of thing. Like, I can take a lot of disparate genres and make them work when they're not supposed to. And that's what I really enjoy about that series. So when Sandy's like, that's why one of the reasons we became friends, besides Destiny, besides video games, and then art and writing came later. We both like, oh, you also do art, you also write. Cool. Let's talk about the nerd things that we love. So
that is so awesome. That's often how storytelling works. You're telling a story, but you cannot do it separate from your own lived experience. In fact, that lived experience makes the stories much better because it feels more authentic.
Well, that's how you create better characters. I mean, you have to give it either a piece of yourself, a piece of someone that lived experience, learned experience. I've always, what's the term? Simulacra and simulation. Mm-hmm. You can tell when someone doesn't know what they're talking about when they're writing very often. And I don't mean to be disparaging, but when someone's trying to write about a battle, I can tell you've never been in a fight in your life. Because you're using these certain words to mask, like, you don't know what a fight, like the cacophony of a battle. Like, when you're really in a fight, or even if you're LARPing, even if you're LARP combat, you are so in the moment, you're in the zone that everything becomes it's a dull hum. You don't hear the noise, but you've never been in a fight. And I can tell that. So I'm like, as I read the book, I kind of like, that's where I kind of start digging at things a little bit, like the creative in me. So
I think you did a very good lead up to the question that you left for Roderick, because every week we do a pass along the question. And last week, Gib came up with a question for you, Roderick. And Gib, do you remember it? Do you want me to recite it?
Please, go ahead. You recite it, because I'm trying to remember what it was. I remember what it was in gist, but you probably wrote it down.
Yeah,
so
I wrote it down. I wrote it down. What Gib wanted to ask you, Roderick, was: is there anything, theme or story wise, that you wouldn't want to tell in the form of a story?
If you want, I'll give you clarification. Like, some things, like whether that feels quote unquote taboo, like, for example, as a male presenting author, as a guy, blah, 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 I'm not going to try to tell a quote female story. I will have female characters. I will have female action. I will feel all these cool things, but I will not try to tell a definitive female story from a perspective like I'm not one. So I'm not going to try to write in that voice, because that's not who I am. And it would feel false. But do you feel that anything's like this, like, I'd say off limits, but just like, nope, that's not for me to tell.
Oh, there are lots of things that I think are not for me to tell. And the most important category is things that I haven't experienced myself. Like, I cannot, your example about wars and battle and maybe the gruesomeness of it, I don't think I can write that, because my only experience with war is video games. And that's probably not the real thing.
Call of Duty.
So I can maybe do an attempt, but it's just not a lived experience. So there are people that can probably do a much better job.
Well, I mean, again, have you ever played soccer and got beat up? I mean, you could be like the guy who lost the fight. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just how you respect it.
Remember, I was a nerd, so I got beaten up even without playing soccer. However, I can't talk about those things. I can talk about being always kind of feeling like the outcast and feeling not accepted or valued for who I am, etc., etc. Another area where I'm very hesitant to write about is to write about existing trauma. So I love to write about things about trauma that I worked through, but I don't think I could write very well about trauma that is still there, that I'm still dealing with or am in the midst about. So using writing as an outlet for unresolved trauma, of course I could do it, but I feel like it might actually do more damage than do good for myself because I'm still processing it, but also for the reader.
If I can push back on that a little bit, if you don't mind, I think that's the best way to write, honestly, because I think for a lot of us, you're going to get the purer moment out of that. I mean, like I'll even throw Religion a bone here. That's what C.S. Lewis was doing when he did Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Like, you know, all the years of growing up, he was a devout atheist, agnostic, didn't believe, despite being raised up in a faith. And by the time he got done writing the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, the Chronicles of Narnia, he found faith in himself through that. It was meant to be a send up of religion. Like, look at these Christ-like figures, look at the Aslan as the lion, look at the witch as the devil. But through time, it's like he came to realize, no, he came to have a deeper understanding of himself and where his place is with religion. So I lovingly, I would say, no, I think you should actually write about your unresolved trauma, because that's how a character learns and grows, because a character who starts at A and ends at A is
And just to
boring.
clarify, it doesn't mean you need to publish it, by the way. Like, you can write it and then as part of the
truth.
whole...
Very true. Obviously, I mean, obviously, there's some trauma. Like, you don't need to start with character A. Like, hey, I was beaten it as a pulp as a child. Like, oh, you don't. You know.
No, I think you have a point
so.
there. In the sense that maybe I was approaching it too much from the angle of I also want to help my readers to go through a certain journey and I want that journey to also have a certain kind of a resolution. And when you're in the middle of trauma, I feel like if I only write about pain and I project that on my characters,
right,
then where's the journey? But you're right. Maybe writing from trauma can also help you make that journey, and then later on kind of...
And I'm also projecting my own stuff onto you, so I apologize for that, because that's what I do with the Technomancer world is me projecting my trauma onto or various forms of trauma. However, it's, what do I always say? It's hope. You can't have hope when it's sunny. Hope exists in the dark times.
Oh, absolutely.
Hope is what gets you through the dark times. So that's what the books are always about. Hope. Most of all my books are about hope in one fashion or another. It's the getting to... There might not be a resolution, but even like Bruce Lee used to say, there's no such thing as perfection, but you don't stop trying for it. You know, it's like, in this is platitudes. It's the journey, not the end. It's the goal. It's the search for healing. It's the search for faith. It's the search for understanding. It's the search for meaning, that gives meaning to ourselves.
I think that's it's a very good point. Maybe I'm could also be kind of by virtue of having to always preach in church, etc. You also always want to communicate a lesson, and so I'm thinking, well, if I haven't learned the lesson, how am I going to communicate it? But you're right. There is value in maybe also integrating this aspect that sometimes things are not resolved or not yet resolved, and
I've always found that that's the best way to connect with an audience, because you've got unresolved things, I've got unresolved things, and I'm going to pretend that I've got it figured out is a lie. It is just prideful lie, because it's like, you can't pretend. Like, even with my son was recently, we always knew he was autistic, but recently he was diagnosed with autism. So we just confirmed what we already knew, like, just like myself and ADHD, etc. But I don't hide my failures from him. But I always show him, like the same way I was in the military. I show anybody I've ever led, here's how I failed. Here's how I got better. Let's work on you, and let's work on it together.
Right.
And that's, but I lead by example, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
No, I think it's definitely food for thought. Maybe it's also just because I'm afraid of my own traumas and my own pain, and I don't want to go there yet. But it's true. The best songs are the songs that are written in the middle of a crisis. And maybe that's true for stories as well. Maybe I'm playing it too safe. It's possible.
Well, I didn't mean to push on you, so I apologize.
Don't apologize. I love being challenged. I mean, it helps. Yeah. Continue to do that. I mean, that's how you get a conversation, instead of, just people uttering statements.
I'm going to agree with you both, by the way. But I mean, since we're speaking about telling stories, Roderick, if I remember correctly, you are actually working on a book, aren't you?
Yeah. Actually, I'm ADHD. I'm working on 8. I'm working on 8 books.
Oh, geez.
Last year,
okay, tell us about the one that is nearest completion.
Well, the nearest, I've completed.
Okay, tell us about your favorite one.
The one that I want to write and I'm currently rewriting is the first one that I started. That was that story that Koki asked me to, talk about. It was like, I immediately knew the story that I was going to tell. This takes place in early medieval Ireland, and we follow these two, young adults. They're like, there's this boy who's about 18, 19, and this girl, 18, 19, and they both, independently of each other, they were childhood friends, but kind of lost track of each other, and then they both decide to enter into a monastery. And this was one of those mixed monasteries that you had in Ireland in those early Middle Ages. So it was both a female and a male branch. And the reason that they want to enter them is very different. She wants to escape from the oppressive situation at home. He wants to become a story mage, as they call it there, which is basically there is magic in this world, but it's magic through storytelling. So it's this whole idea that if you are a story mage, so there are all these monks that are trained. They're trained to travel the country and tell stories, but the stories are so powerful that what the things they tell become a reality. And it can be very dangerous. And the problem is that my protagonist has a major flaw. So he's very powerful, but the problem is that he has been raised as a risk-avoiding boy. And this has to do with his parents, and I wrote a whole prequel to explain that. But in this first story, we don't know. But the problem is he keeps materializing his worst fears, and that actually gets him expelled at one point. And then the two of them, with their little brother and sister, they all have to go on a journey, and it's all about this mystery of how does this magic work and who is actually threatening this, because there is this, in the center of this monastery, there's this big tower that's much more ancient than the monastery itself. And if you enter the tower, it's like the TARDIS. On the inside, it is massive. It goes all the way up to heaven, and the scribes that are formed there, they learn the art of storytelling because they are instructed by angels. And so there's this whole like creating art, and they're making these like drawings and everything. But there's also an antagonist with a whole, mysterious backstory who's trying to get a hold of that power. And anyway, that's kind of the premise. It's
well, I mean, quit drilling, hit oil. I mean, I'm interested in where this is going. Yeah. It's just,
Well, and the problem is, there's an old ritual that once every year, they bring this book of stories that is kept at the top of this tower. They bring it to Croagh St. Patrick, which is that big mountain where St. Patrick has stayed for 40 days. And then during a ritual, they read from that book. And it's like the national event. Everybody joins that. There's a whole festival of storytelling around it. But that is basically that reading creates like a blessing, like a protection over the entire island of Ireland. It makes the crops grow. It's just it protects against sea monsters and whatnot. And then during the first ritual that we read about in a book, there's an attack, and there's basically an attempt to get a hold of that book. And so that sets up the mystery. Well, what's going on and who is doing this? And this has to do with kind of the whole, the backstory is that before these missionaries arrived, it was obviously the Druids and the storytellers of before Christianity that were driven away, basically, or felt that they were pushed out. And so there's this antagonistic relationship between those old storytellers and the new ones. And then, of course, in the story, that ultimately creates an very interesting dynamic that is also about, okay, so but what should you integrate and what have we thrown away? And there... I
assume there are parallels here with obviously Christianity with pagan
exactly. That's
traditions.
exactly the kind of tension.
Easter, Christmas. The time of the year is taking the old stories and incorporating them into the new. I mean, the parallels are very there, and I'm intrigued where this is going, especially with respect for the source where it's coming from. Someone like yourself, I would almost see where someone would tell you stop,
stop doing this.
Yeah. Careful where you're going with that, because if that something like that catches traction, there's are you? I mean, obviously that it has happened. It's clearly there were the snakes were not driven out of the island. It was the druids. It's just snakes are an allegory for druids.
Sure,
it's for the druidity. So
well.
So by saying sure we did that, oops a doopsie. I mean, I don't know how that's going to I mean, I'm curious with it.
Yeah, I have only 2 questions, and that's: have you signed the contract with Silverspore yet?
No.
Can we expect this book?
No, I first really want to write the stories, and this is kind of part. I know myself. I have so many unfinished projects in my life. So what I'm doing now is I develop the world. I've been basically doing the world building in the background. So as I mentioned, I wrote the prequel basically. So what happened that led to this situation, and then I wrote. A kind of an urban fantasy that takes place in that same world, but then 6 or 7, or way more, 14 centuries later. So this is basically Ireland in a fantasy version of it. So it's not really the historical Ireland, although in the first novel there are lots and lots of historical elements. I went to Ireland twice actually to do research for the story. Went to the monastery that is the model actually for my medieval Hogwarts. So that really helps. But at the same time, I also wanted to tell just cool stories. And at the time I was watching The Rookie. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes, yeah, I've seen it.
It's with Nathan Fillion. Yes. And of course I had to watch it because Firefly.
Because Nathan Fillion, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And so I got hooked on that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I want to write a story like that. Can I write a version where we follow a group of police officers, young rookies basically, but this is in an urban fantasy setting in Ireland. And instead of police cars, they ride dragons.
Love that.
And then you have all these high-speed chases, and there's this whole underground network of rivaling crime families, and then you have these rookies that are still trying to find their way, and the main protagonist there is a young girl who is when we meet her, she's passing her driver's license exam on a dragon.
On a dragon, yeah.
And then she enlists for the police force, and then because her dad also worked in the police force, and then but I could write those chapters as episodes, as TV episodes, and so I literally kind of just used the format of a Star Trek TNG episode. So what happens in the first part, what happens then. So it was this whole excitement of being able to write an inconsequential story where I didn't have to think 5 books ahead of how is this going to end. But just every chapter is a little adventure. But then while I was writing that, and this is probably because I had already written a couple of drafts, immediately a bigger story started to insert itself. And I was like, okay, but what if, what is the story of her dad, and why isn't he there, and how, what's going on with these crime families, what's really going on? And then at the end of writing that first draft, I was like, oh, this is the beginning of a new trilogy. I can write more books.
But it feels like you're a bit of a discovery writer, and because there's pantsing and there's plotting. I'm pretty sure you are aware of the differences, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've discovered that I'm a bit of a mix, in the sense that I love to start basically as a pantser. I just start telling a story, and then when I'm at 2/3 of the story, then I turn into a radical plotter, because then I have all these loose threads, and then I sit down, and it literally sometimes takes me weeks to sit down and say, okay, so this third act is the most important one. Because we need to have the dark night of the soul, the crisis moment. Sure, we have to have the final battle. But why? Why? It's not just because I want to go through the motions, but it's what are the real stakes? And then once I have got that plotted out, then I go back and I insert all the foreshadowing and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and that for me is the method that works really well. Like, just start doing stuff, and then later on make sense of it. This is, by the way, also what I'm doing with these like medieval-esque miniatures that I'm painting. So it started first with the idea of I want to make my own illustrations on the inside of the book, and because I'm writing about these early medieval monks, how cool would it be if I had the same kind of little scribbles in the margins?
Oh, that'd be so awesome.
So the entire book is like a medieval
it's
manuscript.
Like in a manuscript, yeah. Oh,
yes,
man.
exactly. And then I was like, but I don't know how to draw that, so I'm just going to teach myself. I'm just going to...
I mean, sir, it looks like you do.
I just opened a Pinterest account, and I just looked for crazy medieval creatures, and I was like, oh, that is so cool. So anyway, I'm just trying to learn, because I'm learning the techniques as well as what am I actually painting. But then when I'm focusing on creating this weird creature, what was it, a sea goat or a mergoat, mermaid plus goat? I was like, I want to draw a mouse.
Did I inspire you?
Because I don't know. Probably. I was still thinking of Mr. Cardinal, or what is it?
Yeah, the Crimson Cardinal. Oh, that was
the Crimson
your name.
Cardinal and the mouse.
Yeah.
It's like I just drew a little mouse who's panicking in the corner. But then that sparked an idea for, well, what if this is a story? And the first drawing that I made was of a cat who is checking his to-do list to see how many mice he has to catch that day. What if that mouse then leads him into an adventure with all these different creatures, and they go on a journey, and every time they discover new crazy medieval creatures. And I'm thinking, oh, but this is actually, I'm going to integrate this in my fantasy books, because the world that I'm creating is basically, what if all these stories were true? So what if there were real dragons, not just in the stained glass windows as symbol of something, but what if it was all real, and all the miracles that saints could do? What if that all really happened? And what can you do story-wise with that?
Have you ever read the Cornelia Funke books, Ink Heart, Ink Spell, Ink Death?
No,
But
I'm Googling it now.
Yeah, you should. It's one of my favorite trilogies out there, and it's about a guy who has the power to, whenever he reads from a book, he brings the book into this world. But in return, something from our world needs to go back into the book. And so basically, the whole trilogy takes place into the two worlds. Our world, where all kinds of fantasy creatures and also like the bad guy has sort of entered our realm, but at the same time, the things he has lost that are now in the book world, and it's really one of my favorite books in the world. And
I'm so sad that you tell me about this, because now I can't use that idea.
Oh no, you can't. You should. I mean, and this would be a whole nother episode on its own. Is like, this is exactly what inspiration is. Like, you read something, or you see something there, and you try to figure out how you can take certain concepts and make that your own, because that's literally what we've been doing from the moment, we, instead of apes, became humans, and we started speaking and telling stories and stuff. So, I mean, by all means, go read the books and see what inspires you.
I will.
Speak for yourself. I'm pro ape, so.
No, I do think it's kind of time to finish up. I mean, I love this conversation. I think we could go on for hours and hours on end, but I do think our listeners and viewers, all 19 of them, yes, Gib. We've been on for an hour, so what I want to do is the following. We still have one question to pass along for our next guest. Yes. So I don't know if you have prepared something, but what
of course
would you ask?
I wrote down that I had to think about it, and then I completely forgot about it, obviously. But I didn't come up with it. And this is a question for whoever is on the next.
Whoever is next.
Not necessarily a writer, can also be.
It could be Gib,
an artist.
For all we know. But then he knows something. I know I have one more guest lined up. She is an animator. But I'm not sure, with the timeline and who comes when and everything. So it could make it a universal question that we could ask anyone.
Well, the question that I often ask is, if you can step into a TARDIS and go back to the person you were when you first started to do that creative thing that you do, what is the one thing you would love to tell that person? It could be advice. Don't do this, or do this now and don't wait, something like that. So what are you going to tell the moment you step out of that TARDIS, you see your younger self? What are you going to tell her or him?
I love that, and I love the visual of the TARDIS along with that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a geek.
Yeah, no, same. I have a TARDIS teapot and the matching teacup.
Never apologize.
Me too. Oh my god.
Oh, and I actually have the sonic screwdriver remote control.
Do you have the Lego set of the TARDIS?
No, sir, I do not. No, I totally skipped out on Lego in my life, but that's a whole.
Have you ever tried? What's the fish fingers with custard?
I have.
Oh, good, excellent.
And 10 out of 10 do not recommend.
Oh, I actually liked it.
It was
weird.
It wasn't gross, but it was weird at the very least.
It was just two good things together.
I want to take both your lunch money.
Just eating them simultaneously instead of sequentially.
Yeah.
I said I want to take your lunch money so bad, both of you.
But thank you so much for this conversation. It was both inspiring and it was just awesome to take a peek in your brain. Yeah.
Likewise. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. I was kind of nervous, so thank you so much. For everyone else who's still listening, thank you so much for still being around. I mean, it's been quite a conversation. So if you found this very interesting, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button. If you're on Spotify, go ahead and follow us there because I promise we will have many more things to discuss over there. While you're at it, go look up Father Roderick on Instagram. I'll be sure to tag him along both here on YouTube and on Spotify. Roderick, thanks again so much.
Well, you're totally welcome. And let me tell you about that very affordable retreat course that I give. It's only $30 an episode. It's so good for your soul.
Please record that for me in that British voice you did earlier, and then we'll mix it in here. Thanks again, Gib. Thank you, too, for joining. Of course, I would never forget you.
You know where I could you. No, I appreciate it, dude. Thank you very much.
And I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.